Did someone say
Androids?
Yo, Wagwan everyone, Sanju Chia here and welcome back to the channel where this morning we're tackling Boruto manga chapter 56. Of course, before we even get into it, I must say shout out and respect to everyone that actually came to the chapter 56 reaction stream last night. It was a fun time talking to a lot of you and the stream went pretty well. Still not as well as those initial streams in October and November, but it was still fun. Of course, even if you came for just 30 seconds to a minute, if you even just stopped by, just passed through, just respect and thanks for tuning in. I just really appreciate it. It was just fun. So that stream is on the channel if you want to check it out. But for the most part, let's jump into chapter 56, chapter title Code. And I must say, initial impressions, this chapter was good. I think it set up a lot of things and highlighted one key thing, if nothing else, to take away from the chapter, that even though we know a lot of things about Karma, there's still a lot that we don't know as well, and that's even reflected in the knowledge that the current cast of characters on display have as well, in terms of their limited knowledge. So I thought that was an interesting takeaway from this chapter. But jumping into it, so we start off this chapter with Boruto seemingly in an interview similar to one we've seen Naruto do when it comes down to the Boruto era. I think Boruto himself has even been on that show by the end of the Boruto Naruto the movie or the Momoshiki arc as well, so it's not the first for him. But what's important to take away from this, even just starting the chapter, that obviously there was a time skip, probably not the one that we want, but obviously there has been one since the end of last chapter. Now, switching over to Kawaki, we eventually find out through his discussions with Amado, Katasuki, and his interaction with Sumeri that it's been a week, which is very interesting because a lot of the things we might have picked up on last chapter, it gives a window of time for, you know, Kishimoto to probably flash back and go back to those moments, but that's yet to be seen. Of course, we'll just have to wait to see if Kishimoto does that. But what I definitely observed and also liked about this chapter, observed first, is that it seems that when it comes on to the interview with Boruto, the host is hyping Boruto up. He's like pushing, he's cutting off Boruto's lines, and he's pushing the agenda that, you know, Boruto saved the village, or at least he minimized the damage that Ishiki could have actually dealt to the village, and he's pushing Boruto as a hero for Konoha. And I found it very funny and interesting because Boruto's what, 13 at this point, and obviously the level of reception and what they're marketing Boruto as in universe right now is stuff that the previous MC Naruto wouldn't have gotten until he was 16. So I thought it was interesting to, you know, see that. Now, of course, Boruto as a character, he's had a fairly good life leading up to shortly before this point in time, so a lot of the characters, a lot of the attention he's getting from being marketed as the hero of the leaf, it doesn't seem to faze him, and I thought that was in character as well when I reread the chapter. So I think he finds it more annoying than anything else. But at the same time, as we dive deeper into the chapter, we find out the true nature of this publicity, and through a scene with Sarada, Shikadai, Inojin, Chocho, and Mitsuki, we find out that Boruto is essentially under constant watch. The information regarding him rampaging and Momoshiki taking over his body has been suppressed from the public. Essentially, they haven't been made aware of that. So, and I think that's only natural. That was a logical move on Konoha's side. They don't want to cause mass panic, as they hinted at in this chapter. But as a result, of course, Team 7's missions are on a standstill, and yeah, it's looking away. But I like that Mitsuki made the point in the chapter where he was saying, yeah, because of where Boruto's karma is at, they have to take a proactive approach and not just sit down and do nothing. So yeah, and at this point the series needs, that's what the series needs, a proactive approach. So I like how in-universe the characters are actually pointing this out. So that's a good part about all of this. But in the grand scheme of things, I also like the fact that Sumere in this chapter was very expressive, very emotive, I must say, and it was funny, honestly, especially the scene where we have Kawaki easily figuring out that she likes Boruto, because obviously, and even Kakutasuke mentions that, she obviously likes Boruto. I just love her in this chapter. It's kind of like a breath of fresh air, and it's funny because last week, Sunday gone, we had that first episode with Sumere and Kawaki interacting, and I don't know if anybody was kind of thinking they would set up this Sumere Kawaki ship, or I don't know, but if you did, obviously with this chapter, Kishimoto basically canceled all of that potential right there by saying, she likes Boruto, and Boruto's the only one she's really interested in. So I just found it interesting to make note of that. But what's interesting about this scene here in its entirety with the characters involved, and the fact that throughout the entirety of this chapter is Amado, who we're reintroduced to in this chapter, and especially since it's been 1 week, it seems like a lot of the points are that plot point of him seemingly talking to someone last chapter isn't really touched on, but every conversation Amado is in this chapter, he's obviously withholding some form of information. There's more than meets the eye, and I know everybody in the Boruto fandom is saying, Amado is mad sus. That is completely obvious. I mean, the first indication, of course, is when Kawaki leaves the lab and he's saying, we'll do that next time. And I know he wasn't referring to the maintenance, because I made a point of saying, Kawaki's like kind of wondering what he's talking about when they showed the question mark when Kawaki was walking away. So there's something more to the Kawaki Amado dynamic, obviously, and we just have to wait to see it. Now, moving forward, we have Kawaki eventually meeting up with Boruto, who he's in a position now where he's not really sure what he should do or what he can do to move forward. And of course, Kawaki becomes a theorist at this point and suggests that Boruto actually try implanting your karma on somebody else. And it's funny because somebody commented on one of my videos earlier this week saying, the same thing. I don't know if you're watching, I don't know if it's a case you saw the spoilers or you genuinely came up with that theory. So if you genuinely came up with it, then kudos to you. Granted, this is also just a theory in universe as well, but it kind of falls in line. What I like about this chapter, it kind of falls in line with a lot of the discussions and predictions that I've been saying for the most part. One where Kawaki points out the fact that since they're at least 80% Otsutsuki, it would be logical to at least assume that somehow, some way, they'd be able to make use of the Otsutsuki's techniques and jutsu and abilities. And that's basically what I was getting at in my Boruto is Stronger Than You Think Part 2 video, where I was talking about the fact that since they're mostly Otsutsuki, they would be able to do some if not have the potential to learn everything that Otsutsuki can do as well. So that's what I like. It kind of reaffirms my discussions that I've been having leading up to this chapter. So that was a good part that I like seeing. Of course, what this does and what I like about this, it kind of puts Boruto in a position where he can try to dictate or push the plot from his point of view and not necessarily wait on Naruto or anybody else. And that's what the story needs, because Boruto's character hasn't reached a point where I feel as a main character he's truly shining. So that's the thing. So putting him in a proactive position, I like that position where Kishimoto is coming from at the same time through Kawaki's theory. So there's that. Of course, this chapter is named Code, and we couldn't just leave it at that. We have to get a decent amount of code in this chapter. So of course, we have Amado in a discussion with Shikamaru and Naruto, explaining that Code is essentially one of the last, if not the last, remaining inner member of Kara, and that essentially the outer members who are left, who only do contract work, which could be room for that, which could leave room for maybe characters we know actually being contracted by Kara before. Who knows? We'll see. But they were saying that essentially once Code is out of the way, Kara essentially falls apart, as a person who would do contract work for them would essentially just stopped doing contract work. So that's the thing. But they're still there. Autos are still there in many regions of the world based on what Amado says, which only makes sense based on how Kara has been, positioning himself, or how they've marketed themselves as an organization. So that made sense. But what was also interesting as well is that, of course, Shikamaru wants to position things that once they take out Code, they have time to decide what to do with the 10 tails. And Amado does agree, that is right, but Code is special, as he puts it. And very special indeed. And while the power skill for this chapter has reached some interesting levels, to say the least, the talk of Code of this chapter, while we do see Code in action, I don't think it's a 100%, how should I put it? I don't think it's a 100% visceral or full acknowledgement of his power on display. I'll try to break down what I mean. It's kind of like with the recent chapter of Dragon Ball Super, if you read it, where Granola essentially wished to be the strongest in the universe, and he beats some characters who we don't know how strong they are. So it's like, this seems cool, but we don't have a reference point, even though Granola's the strongest, if you get what I mean. So yeah, Code goes up to some secret base that Boro had, some cult base, and he beats some guards. So yeah, we know he's strong, but I don't think that's a good test of his abilities, a good test of his power. But on the reverse side, the good thing is that we see some of his abilities. So that's the thing. So I kind of found that to be 50-50 when I tried to be critical about it. So that's the thing. So of course we see Code go up to apparently a base that Boro has had for the longest while, and apparently he's been stashing some secret weapons, to say the least, there. To say the least. But we see Code's abilities on display, and apparently the straps that he has, he can actually lay them out and traverse, or at least transport his body through them. It seems like some form of space-time ninjutsu tech, it seems. And we also, it's highly implied through the fact that he can transform his body, that he might have been not necessarily modified like the rest of the Kara members, but probably has something similar to how Kowanki was modified, and is able to increase the amount of cells in his body to, form weapons and things. So it's interesting. We get a little idea of what Code is capable of, and I'm interested to see how his abilities that were on display in this chapter is going to factor into the choreography of the fights to come. So it's going to be interesting to see how those fights are going to be structured with Kishimoto writing now. So that's the thing to look forward to I took from this chapter. Now, going back to Konoha, it's interesting to note that as Amado is hyping up Code, he's mentioning that Code, who can't actually become a vessel, actually retains aspects of karma that makes it a weapon. And we basically learned that last chapter for the most part. But what's interesting and makes it, or at least raises the stakes from a threat or danger level standpoint with this chapter, which I also predicted in a sense, is that the fact that Code, when he got the karma, the way that his body reacted to it, as Amado said, it produced results or an increase in power that was exceeding Jigen, which is ridiculous. Now, if you want to put that at base Jigen or level 1 Karma Jigen when he just releases Karma, or level 2, at any stage, that puts Code on a completely crazy level of power. And honestly, on both sides where Amado and Kawaki is concerned, where they're both hyping up Code, and it's just crazy. But at the same time, we also learned that Code requested that the limiters be put on his body just to make sure he was actually weaker than Jigen, just to ensure that Jigen's rule or position as leader of the organization wasn't really questioned. So honestly, Code has been positioned with this chapter, well, between last chapter and now, to be quite arguably the strongest character in the verse. But what I found interesting about this chapter is that, like, Amado straight up says he had a bunch of cyborgs that he built that actually exceeded Jigen. Like, what? Like, Like, just what? So it's ridiculous. It's turning into the Android saga, or the Android arc of Dragon Ball Z. Honestly, at this point, I'm just waiting on Cell. I'm just waiting on Cell to come. Like, I've been with the cells of Naruto, Sasuke, Ishiki, and some two other characters maybe. That's all I'm waiting on at this point. Cause this has to be it. It's giving that that Namek, that Frieza saga to Android arc vibes, where we got Frieza, we got Super Saiyans, and then this random scientist on Earth can create cyborgs that are stronger than the strongest beings in the universe. Well, at the time. So, if this doesn't stream Dragon Ball Z Android arc to you, I don't know what will. So, but what was interesting about the conversation as well is that Amado delved into saying that he had to kind of trash or kind of retire those cyborg on Jigen's request, and at the same time, after considering a bunch of things, he came up with Kashin Koji. But to me, it kind of seemed like he was implying that, like, he was still hiding information, because if he had a bunch of cyborgs that exceeded Jigen, including Kashin Koji, then why not use them to take out Ishiki? Granted, he kind of shortened the story, so I think at this point what this chapter is indicating to me is that, and I mean, who couldn't have guessed this, Kashin Koji is still going to be very essential to the plot, as well as us getting a flashback of Amado and Kashin Koji and Ishiki, like a joint flashback between those three, how they met, how Kara started, all of that. I think this chapter has, in a subtle way, indicated that we need those flashbacks, we need that information, we need certain characters to come back into the story, and that there's a lot to come. So I think it kind of left a bit of subtle breadcrumbs, if you get my drift. So there's that. But for the most part, we have Code, who eventually gets to the hideouts and he kills them. But at the same time, on Boruto's side, we have Kawaki suggesting that, yo, let's make this guy Code, who also survived the Karmarization process. Yes, I'm trademarking that. And let's make him your vessel, Boruto. So, of course, Boruto isn't fully on board with it just yet. But, I mean, at this point, it's just a theory by Kawaki. And honestly, I think when you really break it down, as I said at the beginning, there's a lot of things we don't know about Karma, because one of the things you could say is that how if Boruto makes Code his vessel, how do we know it doesn't become another white Karma and it just powers him up? But at the same time, I was also thinking that, to me, it feels like it's implied that the kids that died, excluding like Kawaki and Code, were in the Karmarization process. I don't think they were implanted with a karma using the usual Otsutsuki method. So I'm thinking that if Boruto does, in fact, use if he finds a way to implant karma using the regular Otsutsuki way, then it probably would work. And I think the fact that they'd used a different way to apply karma to these kids may be the factor why Code's karma, well, apart from the fact that there's some reason why Code isn't really compatible with Ishiki's spirit. Yeah, I think at the end, I'm not going to twist myself. I think the fact is that we just don't know everything there is to know about karma, and there's still more to know. So I guess we'll find out. But of course, Boruto, by the end of the conversation with Kawaki, says, yo, I think it's, well, he mentions that Code is a character that nobody wouldn't really want to go up against. He's stronger than Boro, confirmed, and stronger than Delta, confirmed. And at this point, Boruto decides that, yo, it's time to train. So there's that. So I think this chapter really not only raises the stakes. Well, let me continue first. So we have Code getting to the hideout. Apparently Boro, who might have been planning to use the retired cyborgs or something, who knows. But by the end, we're introduced to a new character called Ida or something, some female cyborg who apparently knows everything about the world. And that's where the chapter ends. So in the conclusion, this chapter was good, I felt. Of course, even though it does raise the stakes where Code is concerned, where the fact that we have a bunch of cyborgs who are stronger than Jigen, whether it be BS, even if it's a level stronger than level 1 Karma Jigen, or even if you want to take into consideration that probably Amado saying they're stronger than Jigen for the fact that they'd be able to outlast a Jigen who's using the level 2 Karma with the horn, and probably could outlast Jigen to the point where his body starts to break down. Even if you want to take it to that level, then then honestly the stakes have been raised and the danger level just flat out ridiculous. Like Konoha, like the ninja world right now is in a dire situation, because if you even really look at it, the fact that even Kawaki says Code is stronger than Boro and Delta, and he has limiters on him. This is this, even though Naruto did beat Delta, he still had to use his 6-part Sage mode to do it. 6-part TLB Sage mode to do it. And if this guy is stronger than Delta with restraints on, stronger than level 1 Karma Jigen, possibly level 2, or could even outlast level 2 Karma long enough for Jigen's body to break down, then, and we have a bunch of cybers who could probably do the same, we're talking about multiple 10 tails level danger level threats. And as Boruto puts it, Naruto doesn't have Kurama anymore, so right now he's gonna have to do something to push the plot along, essentially. And I think that's one of the best things coming out of this chapter. It's we've put Boruto in a position where he can be proactive and start pushing the plot along, essentially. But not only that, the fact that I also found it funny that yo, he was getting such celebrity status and everything through the marketing of him saving the village. I found that to be very funny. But I think that also positions Boruto in a position where it's the last major highlight of his life being quote unquote good. Like, so there's that as well. So Boruto being put in proactive position, the danger and threat levels are increased. We've put things in a position for Kara 2.0 with Code and these new set of cyborgs. Still have the 10 tails out there. Amado still being suspect. He's hiding information. I thought it was pretty obvious from this chapter, but there's a lot of stuff that Amado isn't really putting out there, if I'm being honest. So there's that. And at the same time, kind of setting things up to indicate that not only Code, but more than likely it's safe to assume the remaining cyborgs will also have some interesting technology incorporated into their movesets. So I think that speaks volumes for the potential of the fight choreography for the manga going forward at the same time. But also on the negative side, it's not this chapter itself, or probably I could say it's the chapter itself. I don't think the chapter did anything much for us to progress the investment in the antagonist. And what the type of investment that I'm talking about is the main problem with Boruto villains, is that I don't think at this point, even 56 chapters in, we still can't really empathize with the villains. Like, it's like on the surface level you can say, yeah, they're cool, the danger level is up there, they pose a threat, they probably have the technology to make the fight choreography very interesting when it comes on to them eventually fighting characters like Naruto, Sasuke, Boruto, Kawaki, etc, etc. But I think the villains are still falling short in terms of they need a push. Like, we need to go beyond the surface level with them in terms of empathizing with them as characters. So that's the thing, this chapter didn't really help the cause where that's concerned. So that's what I'll say negative wise about this chapter. But apart from that, I thought it was good, honestly. So let me know your thoughts. Of course, be sure to rate, comment, subscribe. Of course, I'll be doing discussions going forward leading up to chapter 57. But let me know what you think. If there's anything I missed, we can talk about it in the comment section if I feel like I missed something. But Sanjay Uchiha, and I'll see you guys in the next Boruto video.